everyone, my name is Agnes Fries and I'm the creator of an online design tool called the Grid Designer. The Grid Designer is used to create color charts for multiple crafts that includes cross stitch, latch hook, crochet, knitting, corner to corner crochet, and basically any craft where you need to create a grid-based color chart. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a project for a particular craft type. In the previous video on my overview of drawing tools, I started with what I call the default project. This is the project that just loads when you refresh the browser screen. So if you go to the website for the first time or you do a refresh, you get this default project. You can edit this default project just as I did with the drawing tools in the overview of drawing tools video. And you can save it with whatever name you want to save it for, and that's a perfectly okay way to work with the Grid Designer. But let's suppose you have a specific craft in mind, and you'd like to pick some options for that. So let's say we want to create a new project, and we'll do like maybe cross stitch and latch hook and maybe knitting or crochet, something like that. And we'll do those 3 examples in this video. Okay, so we just go to the project menu and we pick new project. Okay, then we get this new project layout dialog, and up at the top we're going to select the type of project that we're going to want to create. And in here, if we drop this down, we've got different types of craft projects that we can work with. Okay, and in general, if your craft isn't here, you can work with a grid of square cells or a grid of rectangular cells, whatever happens to work for what you're doing. And there are ways in here for defining those things. The default project is just a generic grid of square cells. And that's all it is. It doesn't have a project type or a particular craft type. Okay, so let's start with cross stitch. We'll do cross stitch, latch hook, and then maybe knitting or crochet, because both of those will have a gauge that we'll want to put in. Maybe we'll take a quick look at corner to corner crochet. Okay, so if we're cross stitching, we'll select that first. Okay, then we have some predefined sizes here. So if you're like using Aida cloth, 14 count Aida, you can select that. And now we'll enter this information down below here, 14 stitches per 1 inch. You have a choice of inches or centimeters. And you can pick any of these. You can also pick none. And then you can edit this directly. Say you had 24 stitches per inch, working with something really fine. And and you can enter in your own value there. Or if you have some other cloth or something, some specific fabric or something that you're working with, you can put any number in here. But let's say we're going to do 14 count Aida. That's a very popular size. And now the next thing we want to do is we want to determine how large our grid is going to be. So how many rows and columns are we going to have in our grid? And once we have put this information in up here and we know that there are 14 stitches per inch, or basically they're going to be 14 grid cells per inch in the final project, we can use our calculator, and this is the calculator button here, to calculate how many rows and columns we'd like to have for a certain size project. We can just enter rows and columns, ourselves without using the calculator, and that's fine. But if you'd like to have your project be a certain size in inches, height and width, let's say we're going to make it 10 inches high and 8 inches wide. Okay, then we can put our numbers in inches, and we can click the calculate button, and that will calculate how many rows and columns we need for our project. Okay, so now we know 140 rows and 112 columns will give us a 10 by 8 or basically an 8 by 10 picture. So let's then the next thing to do is to select the palette that we're going to do. If we're doing cross stitch, we're probably going to be selecting an embroidery floss. DMC is a really popular embroidery floss. That's what I usually work with. And then we click on create project. Okay, and then we get our grid here. Okay, the next thing that we would probably want to do is change the background color. It just picks a default background color to start with. So we probably want to start with, if we're doing a cross stitch, maybe something that looks a little bit like a background. Now changing this background color, as I described in the overview on drawing tools, does not automatically change this background color. So what we need to do that, and if we're just starting out with a brand new project, we just want to go down here and say clear all and say yes. And then that will clear everything out. And at that point, we're ready to draw on our project. Okay. If you want to, save the project, then we would go to project and click. Oh, we have to make a little bit of a change on here. Let's assume that we've edited the project a bit. I'm drawing with white. Let's draw with something nicer here. I'll pick something more visible. Some orange. So, okay, so let's say we've drawn something here that's beautiful and we want to save it. And then we go to project and we say save. Okay, and that's where we give it the project name. So the project name is my cross stitch, or whatever you want to call it. And we say save project, and that saves it in the browser's memory. Okay, so the next time that you come in here and you go to open projects, it will be listed here. So you'll have my cross stitch, and it has a little mini version of the thumbnail of what your project looks like. So you can that can help you in picking out what your project is. You can save quite a few projects in here. If you want to save the project not in the browser memory, but you want to save it on your local machine, so you have a hard copy of it sitting on your computer at home, you want to use the export option to do that. And there is a separate video on import export. You want to take a look at that video, in terms of how projects can be saved to your local machine. Okay, so if you come in here later, then what you would do is, let's say a few days later, and now you want to go see your beautiful project. So you go to project open and you pick my cross stitch project and you open your project like that. Okay. Now let's suppose we want to go on with something else. Let's say we're really a latch hooker. So we're going to pick up our latch hook craft. And again, we have some popular mesh sizes that are listed here in the predefined category. 3.75 is a really common size, especially for kits and things like that. I kind of like to do 5 mesh because it makes it really dense, and I really like that kind of thick feeling. So we can do either one of those. Let's say we do a 3.75 mesh. And you can do the same thing that I showed with cross stitch here. Once you have this information defined, you can put in your rug height and width, how wide and high you want your rug to be. So let's say we're making a rug and we would like it to be 20 by 30. Okay, and then we can calculate, and that will calculate our rows and columns for us. We have several versions of pre-cut latch hook rug yarn here in the palette. So you can pick things. I particularly like Hirschner's latch hook rug yarn. I think they've got a really nice wide selection of colors. But there's Mary Maxim, Shieldcraft. It seems like Shieldcraft isn't available a lot of times. You can't get the right color. They always seem to be out of colors. So, and these are combinations of them. So you can combine, the H stands for Hirschner's, this is Mary Maxim, that's Shieldcraft. So this is all 3 of them. That'll give you a really large palette to choose from. This is Hirschner's and Mary Maxim, this is Hirschner's and Shieldcraft. And then there are those separately. So I usually work with Hirschner's. So now we've got our grid. and we're ready to go. And we would want to go again and change our background color. Say, we're I don't know, we want white or something like that. Then we do it exactly the same way. We clear down here and we say yes. Okay. So that's our background color, and then we're good to go. We're all ready to start editing. Okay. If we are doing some other craft, let's say we're doing knitting, then we would want to put in a gauge for that. That tells us, how the cells are going to be defined. And there we have, I only have one predefined gauge right now because I only have medium yarn pallets in here, but I'll be adding more to this as we go along. So there's a general knitting gauge here. If you have actually created your own swatch and you know exactly what you want to do for that, you can type in your own values here. And again, once you know those values, if you have an idea for how wide the area is where you're going to be making a picture, and usually this is a part of a project. Like for instance, I just knitted my grandson a sweater, and when I worked out the pattern for that, getting his measurements and all of that, then I had a certain area on the front of that sweater that that I was going to I put a little car on there, a little blue car with a smiley face on it, and I think it was 57 by 48, something like that. I'm sorry, not in inches. 57. It ended up being 57 rows. Let's see. Height in inches. Well, that's probably not as applicable for knitting, but let's say you had an 8 by 8 area that you were going to work on. That will also calculate your rows and columns. And note that even though we're doing kind of a square area here, the gauge is going to make the knitting is going to be a little squashed, so the cells are going to be a little smaller than they are. They're not going to be square. They're going to be little rectangles. And then you can pick from one of these yarns right now, and I'm in the process of adding more. So let's pick some yarn, and then we'll say create project, okay? And then again, same thing here. You want to pick your background color and do a clear of whatever color that is by clicking the clear all button down here. Okay. Same thing goes for crocheting. So if we pick crochet, then we also have a gauge that we have to work with. It's much more square, which is one of the reasons I like doing color work in crochet, because the grid is almost square, and it seems to be easier for me to work that way. So you can pick crochet gauge or put in your own gauge down here. However you want to do that. Same thing applies with the calculator. You can, if you want to have, you're making a picture in an afghan or something like that, that you're going to put an edging around, you can, if you know how many inches you want to make that section of it, then that's the way to do that. You use the calculator down here, and then select your yarn. And then there's also corner to corner crochet. This is for a general medium. It's kind of like its own little gauge, although corner to corner crochet is a square. There are little 3 double crochets that make a square, and so it's a square grid basically, and each one of those things is basically could be a different color. Each one of those 3 double crochets can be sections can be a different color. So this is one gauge here, or you can say so many squares per so many inches or centimeters. However, if you've worked out a sample, whatever gauge you're working on. And again, you can use the calculator here to say, oh, I'm making a little blanket. I want it to be 48 by 48, something like that. And it will tell you that's 60 rows and 60 columns. And then you select your yarn, you say create project, and you're good to go. Okay. Then you would set your background color to whatever you want it to be, and then click the clear button. So suppose in this case we wanted a nice green back there. We click clear, we say yes, and now we're ready to go, and we're ready to start drawing on our surface here and whatever we want to have. Okay, so that's the basics of creating a project. Please click the subscribe button. There are going to be a lot more videos coming after this. So for every single tiny thing that's in here, so you don't want to miss that. Thanks. Bye bye.